built on the same site as Fort Dearborn, which was also here to protect the Chicago shipping industry. Now, if you look at that dome structure on the top of the building, it's actually called a belvedere, which means beautiful view. And just under that belvedere is a lovely cocktail bar that does offer a beautiful view of the city and the river. So if that's something you're interested in, you might want to think of doing that later on. As we come out of this bridge, continue looking to your left at the London House, and you can see over the door of the building, you can see the name of what the building used to be, the London Guarantee and Accident Building. You can also see the griffins just a little bit higher on the building, which are those winged lions, which were the logo of the London Accident and Guarantee and Accident Building. So this is another steel frame building. Let's look at yet another steel frame building. Looking ahead to your left at the building with dome structures on its corners and a taller dome tower in the center. That's 35 East Wacker. That was completed in 1926 and designed by Yiver and Dinkelberg. This is another Beaux-Art steel frame building. This building was originally designed to house the jewelers, to be the central area for jewelers in the Chicago area, and for many years was called the Jewelers Building. In order to encourage jewelers to move to that building, the architects included a unique security feature. They had a car elevator where the jewelers could drive their cars with their expensive goods right into the elevator and up to their place of business. For whatever reason, the car elevator never really attracted a lot of jewelers, and sadly, the car elevator no longer exists. Now, if you look at those four dome structures on the corner of the building, they used to contain water tanks. These water tanks were to be used in case of an emergency or fire. See, lots of Chicagoans are thinking about fire in their architecture, and we'll find out why in a bit. Now look to your right, and you can see this dark metal building. This is the AMA Plaza, the dark black and glass metal building. This is the AMA Plaza, and this is a modernist building. It's another steel frame building, but rather than having the steel frame inside, the steel frame has moved to the outside of the building, and the building structure has become its decoration. So as we continue to look to the right, you can see that this building has a very unadorned exterior. This modernist building was designed by Mies van der Rohe and completed in 1971. Mies van der Rohe is known as the father of modernist architecture, and his philosophy of architecture was less is more. And you can see that less is more in this modernist building with its very unadorned exterior. Now, Mies van der Rohe developed this philosophy of less is more in Berlin in the 1930s. The Nazis were not fans of this style of architecture, so he immigrated to Chicago, where he continued to create buildings and influence a whole generation of architects in this less is more modernist philosophy. But after that generation on its mirrored facade, that's a postmodernist building. Postmodernist architects said less is not more, less is a bore, and they wanted to add decorations to their architecture. So postmodernist architects like to reference historical styles or historical buildings. So this building with the white triangle on top is supposed to look like the Parthenon. That white triangle is like the pediment, the top of the Parthenon, and the white strips along its side are supposed to be like the columns of the Parthenon. Of course, these columns don't hold anything up, they're simply decorative, and that's what postmodernist architects like to do. Because this building is so tall and skinny, it has been known in Chicago as Parthenon on a stick. In Chicago, we really like our building nicknames. The building was completed in 1930 and designed by Holabird and Root. This introduces us to yet another style of architecture. This is Art Deco. And Art Deco architecture was all about getting as high as you could. These buildings really took advantage of their internal steel frame. And everything on the outside of the building is flattened in order to draw your eye up and emphasize the verticality and height of the building. These Art Deco buildings were the skyscrapers of their time. In fact, so many of these tall buildings were being built in Chicago at that time that Chicagoans feared that their streets would become sunlit. That's how you get that throne or chair-like form. So so we're going to see some other buildings with that setback throne or chair-like form as we're on our tour. I also want you to look over to your left at where the people are jogging and sitting and walking along the riverfront. This is Chicago's River Walk, completed between 2014 and 2016. And I think there's somebody from San Antonio on the cruise, and I just want to mention that our mayor went to San Antonio, saw the river walk in San Antonio, and said, you know what, we have a river too. Why don't we have a river walk? And so thank you, San Antonio, for inspiring this. We love our river walk here in Chicago. Chicago's River Walk was designed as a series of rooms. Each room sits between a set of bridges. This is one of my favorite rooms. To your left, you'll see the zero depth fountain. On a hot day, it's great for playing in that fountain and getting some gelato. There's the L. Yay, L. If you haven't traveled on it, it's an experience. I'll just say that. All the Chicagoans are laughing. Okay, again, look to your left. Look at the building with this pair of spires sticking out at the top. So remember I told you to look at the bridge houses? How many of you remember to do that? It's okay if you didn't, but it's okay if you did. So just under those spires are decorative elements that are supposed to be bridge houses. As we come out from under this bridge, continue to look to your left, and you'll see a decorative bridge in between that bridge house at the top of the building. This is another post-modernist building. You see the bridge houses and the decorative bridge there? This is another thing that postmodernist architects like to do. It's called contextualism. They like to add decorations to their building that are specifically contextual to where the building is. And so this building proudly says, I am on Chicago's river, and I pay homage to their their bridge houses and their bridges. Just next to that building, continuing to look on your left, is a building with a green curved facade. This building was designed by KPF and completed in 1983. It's 333 West Wacker. This is more postmodernist contextualism. The green of the glass of the building is contextual to the green of the river, and the curve of the facade of the building reflects where we are in the river. We're at the place in the river where the main branch that we've been on curves off to the north and the south branches. Just an interesting fact about this curved green building, for those of you that are fans of 80s films, it is where Ferris Bueller's father worked. So, if you like that. It also nicely reflects the other buildings in this area of the river. This area of the river is called the confluence. It's where the three branches of the river come together. Now we're about to go up the north branch of the confluence, but before we do that, I want you to look at the building directly ahead of us with the upside-down arch at the top of the building. That's River Point, designed by Picard Chilton and completed in 2017. This introduces us to yet another style of architecture. This is contemporary architecture. Contemporary architecture really refers to anything built after the year 2000, and contemporary architecture tends to focus on sustainability and structural innovation. Now, as this building turns to the right, you'll be able to see at the bottom of the building, it might be coming into view for some of you, an arch at the bottom of the building. Can you see that arch there? That's the structural innovation of the building. Now, it looks like that arch is a design feature, and it for sure is, but it's also a structural feature. The design, the arch is coming into view to the left right now. That arch allows the building to suck in its stomach and suspend itself over an active railway line. I told you that Chicago was a railway hub, and it continues to be that. This building is built over an active railway line on what are called air rights. Railroads own the air. Can you believe you can own air? They own the air above their railway lines, and they can sell it to buildings who can develop beautiful buildings above those railway lines. Those windows just below the building, near closer to the level of the water, they look like portholes because they're nautical themed, but they're actually exhaust fans to vent the fumes from the train that sits below that building. So in terms of sustainability, we talked about sustainability a little bit. I want you to look up ahead and to your left, there's like a rose or a salmon colored building. That's Fulton House. That building was completed in 1898 by Frank Abbott. It's the oldest building we'll see on this tour. And for that building, let's talk a little bit about sustainability and something called adaptive reuse. So that building started life as a cold storage facility. It was just basically a giant meat locker. There were no windows on it or anything. In the mid-1800s, Chicago was home to a thriving stockyard industry, and this is where the meat was brought before it was shipped out on trains. Now, the stockyard industry left Chicago, but the building remained, because in terms of sustainability, the greenest building is the building that's already built. So rather than tearing this down, the building went through adaptive reuse, where it was changed from being a giant meat locker to being residences. You can tell it's residences because of the windows and because of the balconies that sit out. The building with the frosting, it started to have some structural lack of integrity, and so those stars you see outside the building, they're actually the ends of steel rods that were put in to secure the building and make sure it would be a safe place for people to live. As we get closer to the building, maybe you can see it from here. Look inside the windows where the balconies are. Can you see how thick the walls used to be? They were about 3 feet or a meter thick to keep everything inside cool. Now, the architect that was in charge of the adaptive reuse was a man named Harry Weiss, and I guess he liked this neighborhood so much that he engaged in some new construction. Again, looking to your left, the building with all the glass and triangles coming up, that's River Cottages. They were completed in 1988, again designed by Harry Weiss. Harry Weiss was an avid sailor. That's where those triangles come from, like the sail of a boat. Also, Harry Weiss just really liked triangles. Remember Harry Weiss and his triangles. We're going to talk more about it. When people first moved into these 4 townhomes here in River Cottages, they were called urban pioneers, because people weren't really living by the river in the 80s. We know that people who live in the 80s, it's a high-end fitness center, and when it was completed, there were no windows here on the back of the building, because in 1979, nobody wanted to be on their stationary bike looking at the river. It was not a pleasant thing. Since then, of course, the river has been cleaned up, and the windows have been added. Now, if you look to your left, look at the Kinsey place of townhomes. These townhomes were built in the early 2000s. 2002 they were completed. And look at the difference in 20 years. These buildings happily embrace the river. They look toward the river. Their gardens are here at the river. And even more importantly, where those people are standing, and we can wave to them, hello, be my reference point, thank you. Where those people are standing, they're at a party, obviously, but where they're standing is actually a public river walk. They can stand there and have their party there, but you can go there too. Because as the river became cleaner, Chicago leaders passed an ordinance in 1988 saying any new or adaptive reuse construction on the river had to include a public river walk to ensure that the river would walk and wave to us and pretend you own one of those houses or buy one of those houses should you desire that. How many of you enjoy shopping from the comfort of your own home and getting it delivered to you, right? So we think of that as a modern convenience, but it's actually something that was pioneered and perfected for 2 kilos. Think of the Amazon website but printed out, right? So he was a very successful business person. And if you look over to your right, you see a green space, and this is A. Montgomery Ward Park. And you might think this park is named for Montgomery Ward because of his success in business. And it partially is, but it's also named for Montgomery Ward because of his role as watchdog of the lakefront. When Chicago was first chartered in 1837, the charter stipulated that the lakefront remain free and clear. However, in the late 1800s, business people and Chicago leaders were interested in selling off every bit of land, including the lakefront, for private development. But Montgomery Ward used his own money and his own time to take Chicago to court. Montgomery Ward won, that's why we have a free and open lakefront, but he did colored building with dark colored balconies hanging off of it. That used to be Sears administrative offices. And as we go by the building, I want you to look at the facade of the building. This is another one of those Art Deco buildings. It's all about focusing on height. And as we go by the building, you can see on the facade those flattened decorations that these Art Deco buildings tended to have in order to draw your eye up and to emphasize the height of the building. So as you look to your right, you can see those etchings in the side of the building in that light brown color of insects or floral arrangements. Those are very typical Art Deco bas relief or low relief, and it doesn't stop your eye from seeing how tall this building is. This is another adaptive reuse building. It used to be offices, and now, of course, these are residences. You can tell that because of the balconies. Continuing to look to your right at the building that says Echo at the top of it, that's 600 West. That was completed in 1908 and designed by Schmidt, Garden, and Martin. That's another Montgomery Ward building originally. Now it's office buildings. All the goods that he would send out to customers throughout the country. And this is where the customers' orders were put together by employees called pickers. The pickers would go around the building picking up the different items in a customer's order to send out. But do you see how long the building is? Do you see how far it goes? This is a long building, and the pickers had to get all around the multiple stories and length of the building. And so in order to do this efficiently, originally this building didn't have a river walk, and so because of that ordinance, a river walk had to be put in, and it was carved out of the first floor of the building. But it's also a covered river walk, which is helpful in Chicago's weather, which isn't always this gorgeous. Okay, as we turn around, I want you to look to your right at this island. This is the only island in the Chicago River and was created through human intervention. You probably know the name of this island, but as a beer. Can anyone guess what it is? Goose Island. Anyone heard of Goose Island? I know. We've heard of Goose Island beer. We've never heard of Goose Island. I don't know why they called it Goose Island beer. It was never manufactured here. I looked it up. So according to Google, it's not. Anyway, the island was created because originally the Chicago River meandered around the left side of the island. But in the 1800s, business people didn't have time for their goods to meander, and they wanted to get there quickly, so they cut a shortcut on the other side of the island. And so now we have Goose Island. I do want to point out to your right, where it says Chicago Tribune and this area here. It's really a construction site here that used to house the Chicago Tribune printing presses. But as a culture, we no longer read newspapers in print. The printing presses went away, and now this is going to be the site of a Bally's casino. And it'll have a public river walk and have restaurants and other public amenities. So we just didn't want poop in their drinking water. So let me explain what I mean by that. So today and in the 1800s, Chicagoans get their water from Lake Michigan. Pollution flowed from the river into Lake Michigan right by the drinking water intake tubes, which meant that in the 1800s, Chicagoans were suffering and dying from waterborne illnesses like typhoid and cholera. And Chicago leaders and business people realized that having your populous intake tube farther out into Lake Michigan, and a tunnel was built, and the intake tube was sent about 2 miles or 3 kilometers farther into the lake, and that was a great engineering process, and it worked for a little while until the first big rainstorm, which then just simply pushed all of that waste farther into the lake and was taken up by the drinking water intake tube again. So another idea had to be offered, and this was to reverse the flow of the river. Rather than sending the waste into the Lake Michigan, send the waste. Sanitary District was formed. Remember that name, we'll talk about it again. And the Chicago Sanitary District was the organization that began to dig this big ditch in 1892. The idea was to dig a ditch lower than the level of the river or the lake so that through gravity, the water would start to flow away from the lake. It took 8 years of digging, thousands and thousands of people involved in it. It was such a huge engineering process that tourists came to Chicago to watch the digging. Nervous. They did not want Chicago's waste flowing by them. So they took to Chicago to court. But the court said, you know what, St. Louis, you put your own waste in the water. So how do you know if it's Chicago's waste or your waste? We're going to let it happen. So the canal was opened, the river was reversed, and it worked. It worked to clean Lake Michigan. It didn't do anything to clean the Chicago River. Remember, the whole idea was to allow industry to continue to pollute the river. It wasn't until the 1970s, with the passage of the Clean Water Act, that Chicago got serious about cleaning up its river. And I'm happy to say that in 2025, the Chicago, even more exciting, so they've got all these animals returning to the river. We have people returning to the river. There will be a swim event on September 21st. And if you want to go Okay, we're coming up to the only bridge I think we're going to see in the upright position. That's the Kinzie Street Railroad Bridge. That's the site of the first railroad bridge over the Chicago River. This isn't that bridge, right? You wouldn't want to be on that bridge. This bridge is from 1906. It's a replacement of that original bridge. And this bridge was declared a national landmark, so it remains in the upright position. This is a single leaf bridge, only one part goes up, but it does work the same way as most Chicago bridges through a counterweight. As we go by this bridge, look back and to your left, behind you to your left, and you're going to see a large cement block at the end of the bridge. It's painted yellow, it's kind of peeling yellow. Oh, hello. That seems like an unsafe place to be, but okay. You see that painted yellow block? That's the counterweight. That's how these bridges work. They're called trunnion bascule bridges. They work like a seesaw with a counterweight. Most of Chicago's movable bridges work this way, but this is the only counterweight that's visible, that we can see. We're about to enter the confluence again, and so I do want you to look straight ahead at the mirrored building. That's 150 North Riverside. It was completed in 2017 and designed by Getch Partners. To your right, can you see the base of the building, how narrow it is? It's kind of a Y shape or a martini glass shape. It needs that narrow shape, that narrow base, because it's built on a very small strip of land. That strip of land is bordered on one side by the river and a river walk, and the other side by an active railway line. And this building site is so small, it was considered unbuildable until the 21st century. So with advances in material technology, the building was able to be built. It said that it looks like an ice skater on a single skate or a ballerina on point. It's held in place with a rigid concrete core or spine, and those sides that are flared out are secured with steel columns that are 40% stronger than conventional steel and had to be imported here special from Luxembourg, I believe. And postage, and they call your friends on social media envious. Hello. So as you continue to take your selfies, I do want you to look to your left and ahead at the building with that stepped out facade. It also has a 3-part column on its base for those of you who can see it. It's another Getch Partner building. It's completed in 2020. And it's the Bank of America Tower. This building was also built on a challenging building site. It's narrower here and enlarges as we move forward. That's why it has that stepped out facade, where the building meets the ground. These buildings are called skyscrapers But the top of the building isn't as important to humanity as where the buildings meet the ground, because that's where humans interact with the building. And these three-part columns allow for greater view of the river for people walking by the building. Continuing to look to your left at that large stone building, that's the Civic Opera House, completed in 1929 and designed by Graham Anderson Probst and White. It's another one of those Art Deco buildings that looks like a chair. It's so big, maybe it looks like a sofa or a love seat or something like that. But you'll notice as we come from under the bridge directly to your left, this part with no windows on it is of course part of the performance space of the opera. It's flanked by office towers with windows. Those office towers were provided to the opera as rental space to provide them with additional income. Unfortunately, that additional income was not enough. As I mentioned, the building was completed in 1921, and they staged their first opera 1 week after the stock market crash of 1921 and closed after that. The Civic Opera had to close, but I'm happy to say that the Lyric Opera now uses the Civic Opera as their home, and it's a beautifully renovated Art Deco building if you're interested in some musical entertainment while you're here in Chicago. And you'll see what I mean. Any trains there right now, but that's a train station. The buildings here along this side of the river are built over active railway lines. Oh, there's a train. It's blue. Can you see it back there? So this is where the metro is. So this is what it means to be built over an active railway line, built on air rights. So as we continue to move down the river, I'm going to show you some buildings that show the evolution of modernist architecture. So as we come out from this building on your right, no adornment on the exterior. This isn't a Mies building, but it is his philosophy of less is more. This is from the 1960s. This is what modernist architecture looked like in the 1960s. Still unadorned, still lots of squares and rectangles, but we've got some color. Okay, it's just white, let's not go wild or anything, but we've got some color. And this color comes from concrete. So we've got a new type of material. It's not metal and glass, now we've got concrete and glass. And this is from the 70s. So we're changing, we're evolving. See that? And the facade of the building is curved. So what we have here is 1980s postmodernism. We've got some color. That green of the glass is reflecting the green of the river. And the glass is puckered like that, or pinched into the corners, so that when the sun reflects off of it, it's dappled the way the sun is when it reflects off the river. And you've got the curve in the facade of the building reflecting the curve in the river and where it is. So now you see the evolution of modernist to postmodernist architecture. As we come out from under this bridge to your left, look up ahead, you'll see a "You Are Here" map. This is a map of the river, just in case you get lost on the river. This is where you are. Helpful, right? Handy. Looking to your right and ahead, there's another post office. It was completed in 1921 and enlarged in 1934, designed by Graham Anderson, Probst and White. When this building was completed, it was the largest post office in the Spiegel. How many of you remember ordering from any of those companies? Okay, good. Got some veterans here on board. Okay. So continuing to look to your right, the old post office, lunch there, it's really beautiful. And if you take a tour, a walking tour with the Chicago Architecture Center, you can be taken to some of the more secret places that you can only get to if you work there, like garden on the roof. That's there as an amenity for employees. You can't see it. Everybody always looks over there when I mention the garden. Unfortunately, you can't see it. Toward an interesting neighborhood in Chicago. As we come out from under this bridge, I do want you to look to your right. It's the new post office. I guess this must have been a really good neighborhood for post offices back here. So the neighborhood that we're about to enter, a few blocks ahead and inland to your right, was the site of the start of the Great Chicago Fire. So I'm to put stronger building and fire codes into place. But again, Chicago leaders didn't want to put any additional expenses on businesses. And businesses knew that the quickly and cheaply building their buildings burnt They could simply collect the payout, rebuild, and maybe make a profit. They just didn't expect the whole city to catch fire at once. So right about here, inland a few blocks, that's where the fire started. There's really nothing you can see, so just in your imagination. That's why I don't, Third of the population, 100,000 people, were left homeless, and Chicagoans wanted someone to blame. Perhaps you've heard of Mrs. O'Leary, but I just mentioned her. Many of you maybe have heard that it was her cow that knocked over a lantern. But they completely made up the story simply to sell more papers. Now Chicago quickly rebuilt because thankfully the railroad roads were outside of the burn zone. So materials and people can come into the city. Ahead of us, it's this concrete building. It's kind of curved looking. It's going to be on the right side of the road as we go by it, and then I'll talk more about the iconic skyscraper ahead of us. This curved building to your right is designed by Bertram Goldberg. It's River City. It was completed in 1988. So as you look at this building, it's unadorned on the outside, right? Not a whole lot of adornment. It's another modernist building. This Bertram Goldberg was a student of Mises, a city within a city. It was designed for young families living in Chicago. The River City includes residences, but it also includes restaurants, a school, a dry cleaner, all sorts of amenities. A very Misesian building with the black metal. Can you hear me? So this building was completed in 1974 and designed by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. And when it was built, it was the headquarters of the Sears building. It's called Willis Tower now, but all true Chicagoans refer to it as, yes, and I will be calling it the Sears Tower, even though it's really the Willis Tower. Just disclaimer, right? The Sears Tower, Willis Tower, that dark building up ahead. So when the Sears Tower, Willis Tower was completed in each tube or pencil is of a different height, that is to defray the wind, to disrupt the wind. All tall buildings have to deal with sway. All tall buildings do indeed sway, but the whole idea is what technology can reduce the sway. Because those towers are each of a different height, it reduces the sway of the building to only 3 feet or 1 meter. Pink granite. This is 311 South Wacker, designed by KPF, completed in 1990. So imagine you're KPF and you're asked to design a building that will literally sit in front of Chicago's most iconic building. What do? So what they decided to do is build the opposite of the Sears Tower, right? So the Sears Tower is metal and square and dark. This building is pink. It's actually pink granite. Its windows are all different sizes. They're not regular sizes. And it's actually at the base an octagon. So as you come out from under this bridge, you can look at the feature at the top of the building. That's a lantern that lights up at night, making the building easy to identify on Chicago's skyline. In fact, that lantern is so bright that it disrupts bird migration, which is why it is dim during bird migration season. Don't worry, we take care of our birds. Now we're coming up to that MAP building again, ahead and to your right. It's this, again, modernist building with the black and metal and glass. As we go past this MAP building, that little narrow opening, look up, and you'll be able to see another view of the Willis Tower. You'll be able to see the ledge of the Willis Tower. It's the glass ledge that is a tourist attraction. You can stand on this ledge, it's 103 feet up, and you can basically stand outside the Sears Tower. It's coming into view for those of you on the bow of the boat, and we'll come into view for the rest of you in a second. So you can see it right up there, the ledge. Now remember, that's something you can do, but remember, this sway is about 1 meter, or 3 feet. I've been told that the ledge is a very popular place for proposals. But I can't see my life without you. And if you'd like to use that, you can go ahead and use it, please, just slightly. Holding up a marionette. When that building was built, there was only only room to sink the foundation for 3 of the 4 corners of the building. The 4th corner hangs over an active railway line. So that white metal truss is that metal visible rather than putting a decorative roof line over it to honor the importance of steel frame construction in Chicago architecture. Now just a little bit closer to us, still on the left, you see that stone building. It's 2 North Riverside Plaza. It's got a clock tower in it. That's another Art Deco building. It was completed in 1929 and designed by Oliver and Root. Now it's now called 2 North Riverside Plaza, but it began life as the home of the Chicago Daily News, a newspaper that no longer exists in Chicago. Right at the river. I think it's interesting that the architects of this building offered this public open plaza on the river. In 1929, the river wasn't such a great place to be, but perhaps they predicted a time when people would want to eat their lunch by the river. You can see there's some chairs up there. People do enjoy their lunch here on the day. This is also one of the first buildings in Chicago, or I think the first building in Chicago to be built over an active railway line. So this building has several firsts. Now, while the building is held in place with concrete and steel, what keeps it from tipping over is actually water. On the roof of the building, you can't see it, are huge tanks of water. Think several Olympic swimming-sized pools of tanks of water. So as we go under the L train track, look at the building straight ahead, the tall, narrow building straight ahead of us. That building lives on a part of Chicago called Wolf Point. And Wolf Point is known as being the social center of Chicago. Look ahead of you, it's going to end up being on the left side of the river, that huge wide building with the green pyramid on the top. That is the Mart. It's another beautiful Art Deco building. It's a really wide building, and in fact was the biggest building in the world when it was built and held that title until the Pentagon was completed. But this building, the Mart, was completed in 1930 and designed by Graham. It was built for the Marshall Fields Company. Marshall Fields was a retailer in Chicago in the 1920s and early buildings on the river. Well, you probably never heard of it. It's called the Reed Murdoch Building. It was completed in 1914, and it was a food warehousing factory. Notice that there's a clock on all 4 faces. That's because this clock tower was offered as a service to the neighborhood. Because in 1914, not everybody could afford their own circular white towers. That's Marina City, completed between 1962 and 1967. Those 2 rounded towers were designed by Bertram Goldberg. Do they look like that other serpentine building we saw earlier? Remember that? With the eyebrow-shaped glasses? Bertram Goldberg, again. Hub towers were really a new advancement here in the city and in residential parking. They had restaurants, they had a bowling alley, they had ice skating rinks, and people really wanted to live here in the interesting pie-slice-shaped residences of these buildings. Now the 1960s brought us corn cobs, but if you look to your right and ahead at the building that's glowing gold, that's the Pendries. It was also known as the Carbide and Carbon building. It was completed in 1929, and it glows gold because this building was completed in 1929, and I find it really interesting that a champagne bottle building was built in 1929. Chicago was not Chicago, the whole country was under prohibition, when you couldn't buy or sell alcohol legally. So perhaps this building was aspirational, I'm not sure. And you remember I mentioned that Mr. Wrigley built this building and he wanted it to be so beautiful to encourage other people to build on that side of the river. And so the Tribune Company, to outdo Mr. Wrigley, had a competition for architects to design the most beautiful building in the world. And so just coming into view, past the Wrigley building, you're going to see a building with a American flag on top, a flagpole, American flagpole on top of the building. That is the Tribune Tower Residences. That was the building that won the Tribune newspaper most beautiful building in the world. Do you think that's the most beautiful building in the world? Well, the Tribune Company did. It was designed by Howells and Hood and completed in 1925. Basically what Howells and Hood, the architects, did was to build an Art Deco building. Notice the strips along the side of the building that really emphasize the verticality of the building. You draw your eye up. And what they did is they plopped a French Gothic church on the top of the building because they knew that the publisher of the Tribune loved French Gothic. The walls of the building, these are just simply there for decoration and to make sure to win the contest. But these decorative flying buttresses had an effect on Chicago architecture. So as we're coming up, continue to look to your left at the building with the spire at the top of the building and the multicolored peacock just under it. That building about halfway down, do you see those upside down L's? Those are more decorative flying buttresses. This is the NBC Tower. It was completed in 1989 and designed by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. These flying buttresses, these decorative flying buttresses, Cap Streeter had his boat on Lake Michigan, was testing it for seaworthiness, as one does before one gun runs to Honduras. And his boat area, he asked construction businesses to dump their debris here, making more land, and he started to sell off plots to other people, creating quite a whole community here, which did not please the wealthier neighbors that lived farther inland. Statue to what we think Mr. Streeter, Cap Streeter, looked like. And I do wonder if people in Streeterville know the interesting history of the name of the place. That fountain you see directly to your left, that is a fountain that is in honor of the Chicago Sanitary District. Remember I told you to remember that name? This is in honor of 100 years of clean drinking water. And the really great thing about this fountain is that every hour on the hour, it shoots a huge plume of water from one side of the river to the other. It's just occupant, which is 400 Lakeshore. It's going to be two very tall residential buildings, condos and apartments, I believe. And the top part of the building, which isn't built yet, is going to contain a decoration that's supposed to look like a waterfall. And what I think is interesting about that is Chicago is so low-lying, we don't have any natural waterfalls. But I guess these will be Chicago's waterfalls. Continuing to look to your left and ahead is a dark black building with the curved facade. The building is shaped like a three-leaf clover. That's Lake Point Tower. It was completed in 1968 and designed by Shipwright and Heinrich. Those are private residences, condos, directly on Chicago, people who live in Lake Point Tower. Also continuing to look ahead on our left, you'll notice a big Ferris wheel. That big Ferris wheel lives on a place called Navy Pier. Navy Pier was completed in 1916 and designed by Charles Frost. Now, since its completion in 1916, Navy Pier has had many purposes. It's now mostly a tourist attraction. It's home to Chicago's Shakespeare. Nothing was kept of it. But then no one would want to be on a Ferris wheel from 1893. That's interesting things about this building. I can talk about just this whole building for the whole tour. The building is 3 towers. The middle tower doesn't touch the ground. It's being supported by the other 2 towers. I've heard people talk about it, the analogy of like 3 friends going out for an interesting evening. It's the stripes of windows. I wonder if you could see that building. That's a building by our friend Harry Reese. Everyone remember I mentioned Harry Reese and his love of triangles? That building is actually a triangle. Do you see how tower? It was completed in 2009 and designed by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. Now the reason I like to do this building last is this building offers a nice summary of what we've talked about in Chicago.